levels.
Welcome back to Hacker Hangouts on a Saturday morning, and I am pumped to be here because we're talking a topic I'm actually weirdly passionate about, and it's the book Daemon. And you'd think someone would be prepared, and I'd have the Daemon book next to me, but I don't because it's over there. But I do hear Gator scrambling for it. So the premise of this entire stream has started. There we go. That's the one. Gator's holding up Daemon by Daniel Suarez, which for us, I think each one of us on the stream truly appreciates this book in many, many ways. And we'll set the precedent. I am warning everyone. There is not going to be necessarily spoilers, but there's definitely going to be pieces of information that's going to maybe give away pieces of it. We're not going to give away core, but we're going to be talking about some of the technology that gets brought up during this book and freedom. And we want to go back to, this was 17 years ago when this book came out. I actually had to do math on it. 17 years ago. And at that point, I remember reading it going this is a little fringe. Will some of this be? But I know Daniel did research on future technology. And now we're 17 years later, and I want to discuss with our expert panel, what's is it possible? How much of it is possible? How much of it is a little science fiction? I do know we're going to have to suspend disbelief, but I want to talk about how practical it is. And to do so, I think we do need to do two things. And one, it's going to feel super gross, but I'm going to force you all to do it, which is give a 30-second toot on your expertise. So it gives a little bit detail of what the pieces you're going to dive into are. And then the second one is we need an overview of kind of the premise of the book and some of the technology pieces that exist. So who wants to give the overview? I'm happy giving it. Gator might want to give it.
If you want to give the overview, go for it.
Well, first, I'm asking everyone to toot themselves a little bit of what their expertise is. I did give a pass earlier on, and I can read those if you want. But I want to hear your expertise. And let's start with Gowrie. I'm throwing it to you. What piece of this are you going to feel most comfortable talking about?
I think just the general engineering aspect, right? The software engineering aspect. How you go from there's the AI side, but then there's can an AI really generate code? If it does generate code, how reliable is it? Things like that. Because my background's in computer science. I have a BS and an MS in computer science with specifics in system engineering. So going from, we'll say, an 85% solution to a 99.9999, good solution, that's the thing I can probably talk to.
Perfect. And you understand the deep magic of computers on the processor architecture level.
Yeah,
he who has done kernel
we'll
patching.
Say that. Whatever.
Gator, what about you? I have you written down as an orchestration guru I had orchestration and automation guru when it comes to systems and infrastructure engineering. Also,
we can roll with that.
Also, probably the most knowledgeable of all of us on decentralized computing, specifically some of the devices, which even the Darknet badge this year was made on.
Right.
Can you talk through a little bit of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So focus more on being able to self-host things, whether that's making sure that if the grid goes down, we've got some fallback, be able to self-host for security-wise, have those communications externally, so via Meshtastic, LoRa, if you need to set up your own Wi-Fi hotspots and such, so where you can have communications. If the repository of the internet goes down, how and where we can go through and still have that repository available offline, as well as building out the communities, because one of the large things that happen inside of Daemon is that you have to have the Bluegrass folks come together and work towards an end goal and a path to go through that process. So
setting up some of the communication channels,
setting up automation, making sure other folks can be able to actually submit to it, and it's very open source in that direction.
Awesome. Gulo, and again, I apologize. My camera's going in and out, but I hear audio's fine. Gulo, I had you as our resident chaos monkey who has the deep ancient knowledge of all things random and can probably fill in the gaps of things missing between all three of us.
Yeah, for this one, my expertise is going to be in the technology that they're using. So I'm playing with the heterodyning or the tartini tones. I'm building the holograms. I'm building designing haptic vests, and just building the physical aspect of a lot of the things that are in the books.
Has anyone else, and this is totally going to be like an inside thing, did anyone, when they read it, read when the hacker Chunky Monkey was there, immediately think of Gulo? And this is a character in the book. I don't know why.
Husky.
What? It was like I just heard him in his voice, and it's not even the skill set matches up, because I think Gulo said it. He would know the haptics, he would know the VR, and right when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, you've designed some of the big holographs like for the huge concerts, which very much come in the book. So that's one quick premise on the book, and I'll give mine, and Gator, everyone fill in the gaps. The premise of the book is this: a genius programmer named Matthew Sobel wrote a daemon throughout his entire life. And that daemon, the thing which kicked it off, Daemon or demon, I'm going to ask it in a minute. But that daemon was sitting there listening for a first event, and then it kicks off all of its processes and all of its to satiate its goal. And one of that event was his death. When he died, the daemon sat there, it read it in the obituaries, and then it kicks off all these different processes. And we'll say with the ultimate goal of solving the humanity problem, and that's not like Terminator, like killing people, but solving it, of redistributing power, redistributing money, coming up with a better way of doing money and economics and things like that, and then facilitating better communication, which isn't controlled. Like a lot of this, a little bit dystopian future. Anything I need to pad in there which gives context to our discussion?
I think that's a good summary. Gulo, you were going to say?
Overall technical supremacy.
Yeah.
So there's the money aspect to it, but you also have to have the technological advantage. You just can't have a daemon running in the background doing weird things if it's not able to do the weird things.
Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of technology. We have like the Daemon program, we have the automates, we have the Razorbacks, the Darknet itself, the government by algorithm standpoint, and all these little hacks in between.
But you can't forget the heads-up display and computing pack too, man. That's kind of important to me, just a little bit. And we are very, very, very close to finally getting there where it's actually able to be done. So
wait, let's jump into two. Let's talk heads up display, because that's the one where, when you mentioned it, this feels like 18 years. We have to remember 18 years ago. It was 20 years ago when this book happened. Let's talk like visual heads up display. Where was it like 17 years ago? I think we had Google Glass was kind of like teased at that point.
No, this is 2007. I don't even think we were anywhere close to Google Glass at that point.
Google Glass holes came, let's see, according to the Wikipedias, that was 2015, January 15th of 2015, Google announced their Google Glass project.
Mid-2011, I see.
Yep.
I'm wrong on this, but I was going to say it. I think we were closer in date to the Virtual Boy than we were to Google Glass, but not quite. Like we're closer in date to Google Glass by like 2 or 3 years, right? So for any of you old timers that remember the Virtual Boy.
Oh yeah.
So Daniel, then he did look forward. Where are we, Gator? You and Gulo, this question's really for you guys more than anyone else. Where are we on heads-up display as it matches to the Daemon to now?
So I would say Gulo's got a lot more experience with this professionally, so I'm going to yield my time to him, and then I'll pick up from the consumer side afterwards.
All right.
So we've been actually pretty close, even when Daemon came out. So the military's been using heads-up displays for a lot of different things for a long, long time. As far as what the Daemon uses, I still argue like the issue I had with Google Glass was they tried to build all of the compute power into the glasses themselves. So you had one side of your head that weighed several ounces more than the other side. So as you watch the Google Glass people walk around, their head starts to tilt to one side more and more. And that's just how they function, because they're head was heavier on that side. As
We
far
call that
as
the,
the
we call that
technology
the
now,
weight of
there's still
smug.
do what?
That's how we said. I call that the weight of smug.
Ooh, good call.
Yeah.
The as far as the technology goes now, we're still doing the same thing. We're trying to build all of the processing power into the glasses, and we're not quite hitting it. The Daemon was built off of building the processing power into like the belt and then just having the visuals on the glasses, which is something that I've been working on and playing with like fiber optics and fiber tapers and lenses and trying to figure out how to display directly on my glasses while the processing is done elsewhere. So we're still a little ways from doing that. I don't know of any other places that are really doing that. Everyone else is either you carry a backpack around or all the processing is in the glasses themselves.
There were specific features in the glasses to identify the individual using them. One was, I think it was retinal scanning. So how practical, like I just noticed, who was it? Ray-Ban came out with their new digital glasses and you look at them and it's like, oh, it's a camera in glasses. So I can't help but ask the question, like retinal scan in glasses, what's the practicality? How much equipment is needed in that?
Okay. But we also are like dealing like right now the Quest 3 just came out and it's got eye tracking built into the headset now as well. So retinal scanning versus eye tracking are a couple different things there. So, and Gulo has changed his entire career to make sure he can go deep dive. So I don't want to speak out of turn. Go for it, Gulo.
Retinal tracking. So that's called foveated tracking. If you ever want to break anything and make tech people cry that are playing with that, develop a lazy eye.
Oh, geez. Or I have to imagine that's actually a huge problem. Can you imagine trying to calibrate a headset to there? I forget the medical term for lazy eye, but can you try and like we need to calibrate our eye trackings to detect how lazy of an eye you have because like it's only noticeable if it's really off to one side. So like, but everyone's going to be slightly different. So that has to be a nightmare. I wouldn't have even thought about that, but trying to sit down and actually work out the engineering to how you calibrate for that is kind of insane. I also know that lazy eye is actually somewhat fixable. Somewhat, I don't think completely. And so like does it change during the operation of using one of these headsets? That's such an engineering nightmare scenario, in my opinion. Anything biometric kind of is.
I'll dive into this one a little bit more, though, because later in Freedom, one of the operatives, I'll skirt the spoiler on this one, loses the ability to have the glasses detect who he is.
Yeah.
Question, the Daemon did have an ability to use other biometric markers to detect who that person was and detect the bypass attempt by the other individual who is now trying to be recognized with that.
Yep.
This, while I think that's the ability, the question is this. This is the Daemon's ability to anticipate attacks, future, more developed attacks against its technological weaknesses. This is kind of the thing I'm stuck on going, how much can I suspend disbelief of the Daemon's ability to do this versus not? So example, it needs to know, easy example is Matthew Sobel knew he was going to die. He can anticipate that. He can program it. He jumping way ahead, anticipating them finding this bug inside the Daemon and then attempting to exploit it.
Right.
Spoiler is if he purposely put the vulnerability there, he could probably anticipate because he goes, okay, lowest vulnerability on the, lowest fruit is going to be this vulnerability. They're going to attack this one. I'm going to program this out. But like anticipating this other weird attack, this retinal one attack, this is now like almost futuristic vision you would have to program it. Gowrie, this is probably a question for you, but Gulo, you're jumping
Gulo
in
first.
Does it really need to be though? So if you're building something out in layers like an onion, then it doesn't really matter what the authentication mechanism is as long as it talks to the authentication piece. So whether you're doing biometrics, passwords, whatever, YubiKeys, as long as it does the authentication piece. It doesn't matter how you're authenticating. So building in the technology later on for the retinal scans, fingerprints, gait tracking, all of that stuff is just the authentication or how you sign on.
And the idea was, I guess, that it was expandable. It wasn't all Matthew Sobel stuff. Other people can write authentication layers. Like, you kind of gain reputation in the system, which gives you the ability to modify more of the daemon based off reputation. So some of it could be built later on. Gowrie?
So your question is, how realistic is it for, I suppose, an AI to have, we'll say, some level of future sight, or what is the intuition as to what its own insecurities could be?
Yes.
I don't think that's, I mean, entirely unreasonable. Here's one of the things that we are struggling with right now with regards to the current state of AI. Is AI creative, or is it regurgitating values that it has been fed in some way? Right? That's the core question that's going through a lot of courts as to whether or not the AI works can be copyrighted. Is it creative, or is it just a machine that dumps zeros in and ones out, right? And we don't really have a good question, or we don't really have a good answer to that at the moment, not technically, because you start getting philosophical in terms of what is creativity. And so one of the implications of your question is essentially, can an AI be creative enough to figure out unknown unknowns? And I suppose intuitively, given the state of things, I would say I don't think it's unreasonable if it's been fed, the whole history of computer hacking and every CVE and all these different types of bugs and all these different types of ways that imagine it just like watching all of Mythbusters and all of Brian Brushwood's stuff to just figure out low-tech hacks and like how can we defeat thermal cameras and all those things. I think it's entirely reasonable that a general AI, should it exist, would be capable of foreseeing some of these style of attacks. Yeah, and then the real question is whether it would be capable of actually mitigating them. Or coming up with new designs that hasn't been seen before. And in some cases, I mean, it depends. So I'm not going to make a definitive statement either way, but I don't think the premise of it is entirely unreasonable.
You brought up a really interesting thought. Gator wants to talk. I'm going to throw it to him, and then I'm pulling it.
So to switch back just for half a second to the whole heads-up display, while we were talking about like Quest and whatnot, there are a couple headsets out there that are coming where they are just displays, finally. And it's just literally a USB-C hung off the back end now. And you can plug it into your own devices. So like the Nreal Airs, they just came out with the Nreal Air 2s and Pros. The cool thing is they're literally USB. There's no sensors inside of them. It's literally just acting like a display, which is exactly what I wanted. When other folks are going through and walking around with cameras facing forward, while if you read in the book, there are abilities to be able to see different sensors and things or information on people that are around you. That's on the whole like data collection OSINT side of the house, but being able to feed that to your vision is one deal. So when it comes to the heads up display, I think we're closer than we've been in the past. With these, you can actually use them. The quality is small enough that you can actually read text on things, which I'm super excited about. So like, these are in my crash bag or my backpack wherever I go now. If I need to be able to go plug into something, I literally have these things to plug in to whatever computer I need to work on instead of bringing an external monitor. So am I wearing them outside in my everyday life yet? No, but I can get my prescription to use them. So I'm getting closer. I'm a little bit excited about that because between like that and then you get your Raspberry Pi Portapack, get yourself a battery system set up, you're getting a little bit closer to having that portable machine with you at all times.
It's always interesting to me when you're talking about prescription glasses in these headsets, because it never made sense to me. I'm like, well, hold on, the screen's right there. You don't have to look that far. And that's like, no, your eye is still adjusting to see far, so it still needs to adjust. Oh, it's so weird. So Gowrie hit something. I wrote two things down. And one of them was, does the daemon need to have the intuition to look forward, to anticipate these things? And it hit me. The daemon is the perfect hack. And go with me on this. We write penetration tests, so my expertise. When we write penetration test reports, we don't talk about all the things that don't work. Like once in a while, we'll give them credit. Like we did credential stuffing and we were unsuccessful, like for major things. But all the red herrings, they're all the paths that led to nothing. Like we exploited this server. It's just because you exploit a server, it's like whoop-de-doo. We exploit 1,000 servers in a pen test, and none of them lead to domain admin. You don't write those things up. There was and this was confirmed by Daniel Suarez. There was when Greg got to the building, like for the initial jump into the daemon, again, being somewhat vague, there was a car on the side of the building, which he never talks about. There's never another mention of why that car got there. And the idea was he was going to write a novella talking about that was one of the trial runs early in the development cycle where someone got caught in an infinite loop within the daemon and never went in, and they just died in their car. Like they weren't allowed to leave. They weren't allowed to go in. They were just caught in an infinite loop. And this was during like bugging or debugging the daemon, we'll say. But what's interesting on the daemon is if we're reading the book as a penetration test report, this is the perfect hack. How many times along the line did it completely fail and we didn't hear about the story? Like there might be like 6 other adventures going on that led nowhere, and we're leading the perfect report.
Oh, it's like the perfect example of survivorship bias. It's just like we're reading the one quest line where everything went right.
Yeah. So it hit me as like as you were talking, like it's kind of like real world fuzzing. It doesn't, even when I'm thinking about like some of the other hacks, like the active penetration tests it did while it was going, it doesn't even have to care about breaking things. Who cares about testing in UAT or QA or dev environment? We test in production because it doesn't have to care about necessarily breaking the thing. It can just like do the autopwn by Metasploit and just run every exploit against it.
Oh, it's the Tesla model where they just use their users as beta testers.
Ding ding. Yeah.
There's the transition to the next topic. We have automates, computer-controlled driverless cars, which are prevalent throughout the Daemon universe.
Yeah, that's the single most unrealistic thing in the book.
Really?
I mean, if you ask Elon Musk, it's coming next year.
It's always coming next year.
So you're saying it's completely unreasonable, because I felt like this was probably the closest one we have to reality out of a lot of the technologies.
Yeah, I'm being hyperbolic.
Because like, but like it hit me
all I'm saying is, where is my ninja sword wielding motorcycle that drives? Okay,
fine.
Yes.
We'll jump to Razorbacks, robotic riderless motorcycles. Effectively, it was the next iteration of the automate, where it's a motorcycle with like giant. I always assumed they were like sickles, like the sickle things.
I've got Buster Sword or katanas, man, all the way, because they change them out often enough, make them thin fins and whatnot. But sickles is an interesting thought for sure.
I always thought it was like long sickles in the front, like almost like a praying mantis. Like that was the model for it.
Cyberpunk style. I got you. I got you.
Of course. So, question though, what is the practicality? And now I'm not expert on. I can talk through like the CAN bus network and the separation between CAN bus network and we'll say in the control and in like your dashboard computing. But that's the problem with a lot of like what's happening with Tesla and whatnot. Those things are getting like standardly, you would have your car's radio and multimedia player and all of that over here. Then you'd have the CAN bus network, the thing that's controlling the motor and the temperature and fuel intake and all of these things over here. And there was just like, they weren't connected. They were completely separate. And if there was a connection found between them, like if I shorted out an LED, like that was critical, egregious vulnerability. Now they're kind of like, we're just like, it's fine. And then the one that terrifies me. But I start going like, part of this feels, I feel like we're hitting a little bit of a potential possibility when it comes to automates. Because, mind you, we go back to we test in production. We're not worried about killing people. Like, oh gosh, right. That's going to be the clip which someone actually puts online. We're not worried about killing people. We said it here. But if you're not worried about killing someone, you could turn on completely autonomous vehicle. We have very good people tracking and Gulo can agree to that, I would think. We have very good people tracking, who it is, facial recognition from afar, that could go in a camera. And if you're not worried about, you'd pretty much say, here is your point, go around this building, kill anyone who gets close. Are we in the realm of possibility on that one?
The whole Spirit Guardians, but with vehicles? Yes.
Because if you look at all the failings of like the San Francisco autonomous cars that are now being banned, then they're like, you can trap them by just placing cones in front of them. But if you don't care about cones, people, other cars, property, we have autonomous cars. I can drive around and run people over. That's no problem. We do it all the time.
The solution to the trolley problem is to split into two and hit both groups of people.
That's like some Spy Hunter stuff, right? Shed the shell and start going after two. Yeah.
All right. Any more to talk on that one? Because I have I'll keep going down the list of topics.
Go for it.
All right. The next one, and I'm disappointed in this one because I had grand ideas of where we'll say hacker communication would be within 17 years. In the Darknet portrayed in the book is radically different from the Darknet as it exists today. Because it's very decentralized in the book. It has a lot of resiliency against attack. It's taken over zillions of networks and been able to expand its resiliency to attack. Darknet today, kind of resilient, kind of there. Like exit nodes are still in and of itself kind of an issue. It's resiliency. It's not very private. Like it is, but there's kind of arguments there, and there's been major vulnerabilities there. It's kind of a cesspool of memes and maybe helpful and a lot of grossness, and then more often is junk, we'll say. And when you have this idea of in the Daemon in the book, it's spammers will be killed on sight. And now here it's that's kind of where a lot of this occurs. Disappointing, but where are we on the realm of possibility when it comes to a decentralized network?
Mastodon? ActivityPub?
I mean,
there are abilities for these things to take root, but the problem is when it comes to the adoption of any new technology or of a new social system, right? And one of the things that the Daemon had driving for it is people were signing up or getting into it and then using whatever chat platform, whatever communications that they were building out their own infrastructure and sending that across, setting up their own holons, setting up their own infrastructure to not depend on the grid, if you will. So while we've got all these open source alternatives to Facebook, X, Twitter, whatever else, looking at the Fediverse, that's there. It's been there for a while. Actually hosting those and making sure they stay up, hey, that takes real sysadmin work. And sometimes that works out great. Sometimes people just like to tinker. But the reality is we have the software there. I think when you're specifically talking about the infrastructure and making sure that it's more stable, we don't have an alternate, flip the button if the grid goes down, ready to go. There may be individual pockets that are doing that, but long-term communication back and forth. And when we're talking about Darknet, I think what you were talking about specifically, Silk, was talking about the Tor network for the Darknet, right?
Well, even a practicality of a decentralized network, because the other piece of this is, of all of these, the Fediverse maybe, but we're talking about event-driven computing in a decentralized way. We're saying when an event is emitted, right, instantaneously it can be done. And I've yet to find any decentralized computing which is that fast. Almost real time, we're saying.
Do you have an example? I don't quite follow your...
Let's say Mastodon. how quickly could a message be pushed through the entire network? What's the typical, epoch or whatever they call it now?
Whenever you're tweeting, or putting the message out there.
Yeah.
My understanding is pretty fast at this point, Silk.
We're all right. So take that real time and now have every node on the entire network sending out that much communication, because we're hitting like Daemon needed access to all of the events from all of these things on the entire network all at the same time, effectively.
No,
I guess it was decentralized. You're right.
It was decentralized. So you had different pieces of software that were waiting for input. And those pieces of software didn't necessarily have to communicate with all of the entire infrastructure. It just had to look for one thing and then execute its one job after that one thing happens.
Yep.
Which is
like
surprisingly... Yeah, I was going to say, which is surprising, maybe not surprisingly, because Daniel's usually pretty good about this, exactly how big, complicated systems that are reliable are built. They are broken down into tiny, tiny, reliable systems. So I think technologically, it's a pretty sound idea. I think in execution today, at least doing this on we'll say a social network style system, we've learned that the social aspect of that is the single most vulnerable piece, and that's probably the most unrealistic piece of it.
The other one I was thinking about is you have a digital currency that exists in the Daemon world, and a piece of this, you immediately try and go, oh, it's like Bitcoin or it's like this. And I think there is a key difference to something like the cryptocurrencies that exist today and the one in the book. And this is actually, I think, what makes this feasible today of like this, and that could actually occur. But the difference is people were forced onto the Darknet. People were forced on the Darknet because the economy completely was decimated. The Daemon decimated the US dollar. You saw this trend happen where Bitcoin, the Darknet coin, was worth way more. And because the Darknet credit, thank you, was because the economy was decimated, this was the jump to it. This was like you had to move on over to this type of currency in order to survive. Where the flip on it today is like, the U.S. currency was the U.S. dollar strong to be able to control this entire market. So it almost feels like a little flipped there, where in order for something like this to happen, you would have to decimate a currency in order to prop one up. Does that make sense?
That's not necessarily true, though, because it wasn't based off of the work of a computer system to build the currency. It was based off the intrinsic value of power and green energy and being self-sustainable. So they actually had things kind of like the gold standard, but it wasn't actual precious metals that they were doing. It was, how sustainable are you? What manufacturing capabilities can you do? There's a physical aspect to what the Darknet currency was for.
That's how it drove forward. Initially, it was started off of, because Matthew Sobel had two different companies that he was going through and running with Cyberstorm Systems, which was a big gaming company, right? Made two of the most popular games. He was super smart, so he had a bunch of money tucked away that pre-started this thing. As things went further on from Daemon over into the Freedom book, which is the sequel, to be able to help create and sustain things to where they became self-sustained after that initial kickstart of money in the beginning. Absolutely what Gulo said. You were setting up Holons to go through and set up your own energy creation, whether it be wind, solar, whatever else that made sense for your area, because one size doesn't fit all, right? Coming out here to California and putting up solar panels versus putting up wind turbines, it may or may not work. So they were specifically calling out their best areas for their resources.
The piece I'm hitting on, though, is that it wasn't right now. Crypto as it exists today is a replacement and an investment platform for fiat, for US currency, where that was built on I'm not disagreeing. I'm saying I think the flip is none of the cryptocurrencies as they exist today would be comparable to this, because they're used as an investment platform to make more fiat. They're not to make more Bitcoin. They're to make more U.S. currency through an investment platform. Because you can't buy anything. It depends on who you talk to.
I get who you ask, right? Like
fair enough.
People can buy stuff with cryptocurrencies. It's just it's possible.
I'm going to argue that one a little bit. Yes, you're true, but who are you buying it from? And are the people you're buying it from trying to get more Bitcoin, or are they just converting? They're taking crypto and they're just converting it right back to U.S. currency, which is how most companies do it.
This sounds like a semantic argument.
Sure.
What define purchase, right? Like if I buy something from the UK using US dollars, am I using US dollars? They're just going to convert it into GBP. Like
fair enough.
Can you converse with it? Can you actually buy things with it is the question, right? And now compared to 14 years ago or 17 years ago, I'm surprised it's not just Newegg that's taking cryptocurrency anymore.
Heard
Overstock.com and stuff, but how many people are actually doing that?
Yeah, when the transaction fee itself is huge.
But and when you buy a $500 TV one day using Bitcoin, did you now just pay $70 for it or $40,000 for it the next day?
Yeah. Okay. Let's not litigate Bitcoin.
No. So my point was strictly that if this was to be possible and feasible, I don't think you can have established crypto and U.S. currency. The only way you would do, or any currency, you would have to effectively decimate an economy so that you could have something which has already been backed, like grassroots. It's let's say Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the one. You can't have a strong currency to. I don't know. I don't know. I guess maybe I'm pulling at straws on this one.
So you're looking at Gator's probably going to be able to talk better to this than I can, but from the hold on level, you're looking at. I care about my local economy and not the global economy. I don't care how much I'm able to convert this to other things until I need to convert it, because I need to be self-sustainable in my own in my own little neighborhood of things. I need to be self-sustaining, so I don't necessarily have to do those conversions. We're not looking for world domination. We're looking for community domination, which then cascades into world domination.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny, but I think the way that this translates into economics and the reason why it's so hard to kind of square the current reality with something in Daemon is the book presents an economic system that's, I'll say, closer to anarcho-capitalist rather than and arguably you could say anarcho-socialist, depending, but it's really not the economic system we live in today. So it's hard to talk about it in terms of this horrible economy we live in.
And so I will, to your point on if you have to have like one crash versus the other, as part of the book in Freedom, the follow-up, they're talking about the US dollar versus the Darknet credit. And at the beginning of the book, things are about equal. And then as things go very, very wrong, then things start going in two opposite directions. So having something start up at the same time, it talks about how you and where you put your value, right? If you can trade on X versus on Y, doesn't matter to you which currency that you're going through and using. So I wouldn't say that one needs to completely crash for another one to come along as well. One of the things that I hear commonly talked about, though, is that you do have to have that initial investment up front to say whether it's Bitcoin and the Darknet credit to be able to actually have funds there to get things kicked off. Because without that first little bit right now, trying to do it piecemeal is much harder to get the overall project moving forward.
All right, so let's jump. I'm going to pull us back a little bit, back to the beginning, because we're on step. Oh goodness, I have it as 5. I came up with 6 steps of how Daemon comes about. And I think we're on step 5. I'm going to pull us back to number 1, which is if you are going to read it, you hate spoilers, like 10 minutes, like you're going to want to zone out because I'm going to release things. So first one, activate. This one's maybe not as much a spoiler because it happens in like the back of the book and we've already talked about activation upon the creator's death. The Daemon activates on the creator's death. Possible? not possible? Feasible, not feasible? What's the
It's
vote?
absolutely possible.
Totally
No
feasible.
problem.
Totally feasible.
We monitor. I'm terrible with words today.
RSS feeds.
We the RSS feed, but we monitor the astronauts on the ISS for their vitals, like 24/7. Of course, it's possible.
Building the Daemon as a single developer, I would say not feasible. Even in the book, it's not feasible.
Right.
So
and
now
the book-
building the Daemon with a team and then offing the other developers upon your death through automation, feasible, not feasible?
possible.
Braden,
do
it all
Deadman
the
time.
switches exist now.
We
Yeah,
have drone
Gulo's sitting
strikes
there
every
like-
single day.
Yeah, I was gonna say Gulo's sitting there like, not only is it possible,
Actually, speaking of
there's a drone outside your doors right now.
So that's the
Speaking
other
of
book.
Braden's comment there, if you go on GitHub and look at Deadman Switch, it's not just like this exists, one of these exists. There is now like two pieces on this. One, there's zillions of projects that exist for Deadman Switches online. Like, okay, my passwords get released, my blah, blah, blah get released if I don't check into the daemon. But now what's weird about this, and this is like such a future view, like future proofing of your soft, like 1Password day one, like password managers start realizing like we need a Deadman switch in this. We need a loved one to be able to get into their passwords so that they can reset, get into their utilities and things like that. So like, it's weird to me that we're now, as a technology, we're finally getting to this point. And it makes sense timing wise that we're finally worried about like, okay, what happens if someone dies using the software? But Deadman switches in GitHub. You can get it right now. All right. Creator's death. We've programmed it. We've killed all the other developers who helped us program it. What's the feasibility of taking over companies?
Oh, you mean I don't know, maybe some ransomware, some lockware, some
Through
something that's
automation. Early on, it was through automation.
No,
Ransomware.
well, okay. It's absolutely ransomware, man. The claim in the book, with trying not to give too many spoilers, while there was a large company that was a game company and they had the two largest games at the point in time, the claim was it came along with the games. That was the distraction, because okay, who's going to use the mom and pop or gamers PCs while they are powerful versus enterprise gigantic data centers, right? So for me, I think going to the ransomware side of the house at the good old the control and command center, right? I don't think this is outside of the realm of possible right this very second.
I'll actually jump in on this one because this falls into, I think, a few categories. You don't necessarily, this is like, I think when I first read this one, I was like, this is impossible. It's like, there's too much nuance, which goes into pen testing sometimes, and for that level of access. But then you realize we're talking about the perfect attack. We're not talking about the other 1,000 companies in which the attack didn't work. We're talking low-hanging fruit and then launching Death Star. Death Star, not like the Star Wars Death Star, as in like there is a piece of software on GitHub to do autonomous domain admin escalation. Like, very possible. Looking across the Active Directory, looking at all your databases, easily. Like, you can query against that right now. Logging into those databases, encrypting the data, fully doable. Backing up, and we're gone and we're back. Going in, hosing the backups, still kind of possible if they're added to the domain. Hosing off-site backups, at that point, that's when you're doing almost like a scripted social engineering attack, because the IT staff. You then send them an email which says, here is $50,000. Go and hose the backups and provide me confirmation. Like, this one starts seeing weirdly possible through automation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need to go that far though? So the automation piece of the backups, depending on which company, but a bunch of companies that I've worked for, we only had 60 or 90-day backups due to litigation reasons. So because of that, we only stored our backups off-site for a couple of months before we actively destroyed them or expired the data that was on them. So if you're talking about ransomware, as long as it's installed and it doesn't activate until X time, then your backups are done anyways.
Yep.
Also, yeah, this is another way of saying if you don't test your backups, you don't have backups. And how many companies actually test their backups?
Good sysadmins do.
Th-
Good. I
this-
believe that they're out there.
This is
I
totally
believe that they're-
You know how this conversation went, I'm guessing, with Daniel when he's interviewing like IT people and whatnot. He's like, how often do people test their backups? And you can tell like the person going, oh yeah, all the time. We totally do it.
Here's
all
our
the
SOP.
time. Here's the SOP of how often we do it, but we never actually do it.
I like the idea of like, do you want the actual answer or do you want the answer that's going to give you a better story?
I want to hear the story of why you had to verify, because that becomes the real interesting point, because
Yeah.
everybody's got that story.
All right, here we go. Step 3, recruitment of real world agents. And I'm going to throw 2 things in here. Recruitment. Yeah, cool. It's like, I've already signed up. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm a chaos
Recruitment
monkey.
of
That's what
real
we do.
world agents were lower down the line, but upper on the line was, I want to say forcibly, but kind of recruiting so there was a technology in the book, which was, oh goodness, fMRI,
Right.
functional magnetic, I'm a renaissance imaging.
Resonance.
Resonance,
got it.
thank you. It was used for the new justice implementation or implemented by the Daemon, where individuals are tested to ensure the authenticity of their self-stated motives. I want to talk about this one because this was a large discussion between me and Daniel at one point. Question though, forcible recruiting through this type of system. Possible, not possible?
Totally.
Okay,
Totally.
here comes the
Force-
fun
Well,
part.
hold on. Define forcible here?
Forcible because they shove this thing on your face. You answer the questions. If you're found to be inauthentic, you were killed through lethal injection.
Yeah, I mean,
Forcible.
I've seen Black Mirror. That's totally. You haven't seen that episode of Black Mirror? Yeah,
I haven't
that's
watched
totally
that.
reasonable.
But so
Messed
this
up.
is enforceable though.
Right.
Because
Early days.
you're either going to join or you're not going to join. It's not necessarily your choice at a conscious level. It's your choice at a subconscious level. So that's where, like, as a chaos monkey, I don't know if I could actually be recruited that way because they're going to be like, this dude's going to burn everything down.
Chaotic neutral. So
The technology.
Is the technology there to be able to detect lying? 2.
Yes.
Do we have the ability to detect lying?
Yes.
Do we have the ability to detect it through fMRI? Is it in a device small enough where it just sits over your head?
Okay, so here's the thing. On that, it's not portable yet, but it is available even down to consumer level at this point. For less than $1,000, you can build one of these things of your own. So this is where it's like, oh my, we are this close. The only reason why I am not bald yet is because they need to be able to have skin to skin contact to be able to get the better reading versus having a head of hair on, right? So these things are very, very, very close.
Yeah, I'm already ready. My body is ready.
So as far as science fiction things go, this is something that actually exists. One of the companies I worked for, we were playing with controlling our VR avatars, playing our games, just wearing a headset. And you were thinking about throwing a fireball or pulling the trigger. You had to train it for a little while, but after that training was complete, you could actually semi-play your game. And we were developing that technology of, why do I need to use my hands to do this? And there's an entire like ADA section, and I can't remember the name of it, of people like hard of hearing or deaf people or blind that use these as a communication mechanism for talking on the phone or responding to things. And the consumer version or like the medical versions were all kind of crap. But once we went over and started playing with the ADA stuff, that stuff's phenomenal. I mean, it's not perfect. It's not there yet, but oh my God, was it leaps and bounds better than everything else that we'd played with.
I would ask the question is when it splits between 2 pieces. It's like, I think there's the early version of the fMRI technology as it exists in the book, which was used training. You'd say you could train it to identify truth or false. Show blue, is this blue? Map the blame pattern. Show red, say it's green. Map the blame pattern. I'm screwed because I'm colorblind, so I'm going to think I'm lying half the time anyway, but hopefully it uses numbers or something. Then there's later in the book where this thing's like slapped over the head and it can instantly say if they're true or lie. That one I think is going to be fiction for a while. Gallery, what were you going to mention?
Say fMRI lie detection has been around since the mid 2000s. It's just absurdly expensive, and
really,
it requires. Well, the thing is, if you understand what fMRI is, it requires a person to be incredibly still in order to get an actual reasonable picture out, right? So, like, yeah, I mean, the fMRI lie detection has been around, totally feasible. It's got like at least depending on the papers you read, it's got something like a 90% accuracy. By comparison, the polygraph is pseudoscience bullshit that is 51% accurate. Mostly it's good at getting people to admitting stuff because a trained interrogator is good at that too. But yeah, no, this one I don't think is, it's a little sensationalized for the book, but I don't think it's the technology is not infeasible. It exists. The fact that we don't use it is mostly like a legal rights issue.
There is an awesome TED talk on this as well. If I can find it, I'll put a link to it or put it in the comments, because they have an example of, hey, here's the set that you can go pick up now. Here's the software you can load. Think about pulling the box towards you. Okay, great. Now you are in training mode. Now let's go to the testing mode and absolutely being able to push and pull this box or being able to interact with other things. It's pretty freaking awesome.
So recruitment of real world agents later in the book, I think is like, yes, like that's a resounding yes.
Plausible.
The one which was interesting, and this was like an anecdote I was fascinated with, was early on the Daemon wasn't worried about whether you were good or bad. It was, or whether you're good or bad, or what it was looking for in the fMRI. It was strictly looking to do, were you a threat to the Daemon as it exists that day? That was interesting to me. He wasn't looking for good people or bad people. It wasn't looking for even truthful or honest. It was looking, is this person a threat? That was its goal early on, was, is this a threat to the infrastructure? I thought that was interesting.
Isn't that how all societies work?
This is a dangerous information alert. If you don't want something that changes your life fundamentally, don't listen. This is Rocco's this is Rocco's basilisk, right? Like this is basically just Rocco's basilisk, which is a thought experiment that says, an otherwise benevolent AI would in the future be incentivized to torture anyone who either would attempt to kill it or not directly contribute to its advancement, right? And so if you don't help the demon, the demon will destroy you, essentially. And so like there's a whole thought experiment about this, but this is basically the idea behind this is, what if I took Rocco's basilisk and I turned it into a book? And I love it. It's great.
It's awesome. I do love this book. All right, let's jump. So the last three we've talked about. The creation of autonomous vehicles. I'd say feasible, like pretty feasible. There's definitely there's an advancement that's needed, but when you don't actually care about human life, like as a Daemon, I feel you could advance pretty quickly on this. I think that's feasible. Like at least maybe in the technology, like you've seen the Boston Robotics or Boston Dynamics.
Yep.
You've seen some of their robots. Like we're not there yet, but I do think you put the best minds together, you pay them a lot of money, we probably could come up with something like this. And then military technology where it is right now, we know a lot of that's already possible. Like the darts which exist in the thing, very possible. I would say it's very, very possible and kind of exists already. Actually does exist already. Establishment of the Darknet, feasible, but would have to, I would think, you would need some development minds behind it and know how all those pieces work together. Feasible?
I don't think it's infeasible. I think the least feasible aspect about it is the social aspect, as proven by literally every social network that exists today. Right?
Mhm.
It would eventually eat itself, is what I'm trying
So
to say.
there's something that's kind of bothered me for a while now, and it was the Daemon had the ability to do upvoting and downvoting of different things.
Right.
And
Reputation.
I thought that was excellent, and society would take that over. And I agreed with how the book went. And then I watched an episode of Black Mirror where all of society was crumbling and had to do what everyone else thought would, like, they were striving for everyone's approval. And their entire lives were crushed when they would get like a negative review or somebody dislikes something. And I was like,
I
oh
mean,
God, this is what real society would do, not what the Daemon would do.
yeah. You don't even need to like China's
many are
got social
bots?
credit scores, man. Like this exists. It's not even
Yeah.
infeasible. It's a thing.
It's already existing. It's just to what degree is it integrated into our everyday lives right now, or is it being measured, at least in our current society versus other societies? It's a little bit more prevalent currently.
There was this measurement, which was inside Daemon, talking about it was the power dynamic. If power, and it was the goal was to be in the middle. You didn't want too much power with too few people. You didn't want because then there's too many people. Too few people can make very large decisions, and you didn't want too much power distributed across everyone, or nothing could happen. So there was kind of like the upvote downvote was for communication, which I Reddit. Just get ads every 4 posts. And then in the middle, could you imagine the Daemon? What would the Daemon advertise for? Like, what would be a third ad down on the Reddit post?
It would have to be a, hey, here's how to build your own windmill, or being able to help your local hull on out, because they wouldn't be doing things negatively. Because here's the other thing that I think is
Razorbacks.
interesting within the whole universe of this is we all had access. If you were part of the Darknet, you had access to everybody's information, including being able to see how much in debt they were, what medications that they were taking. Everything was available on these heads-up display on a specific layer of D-space. So the information that's being sold for each one of us right now, from different people and being able to be bought up so we get better advertising, is already available right now. And we can look for these things. We can buy these things. They're just not as available for everybody at this point in time. So the jump from being able to have that D-space layer available for everybody for free, or it's bought by the Daemon, and when you become a member, you get access to all that information. It's not far off. It
was only when you got a certain level. I'm pretty sure that one was because the character who was doing that was like not the assassin, but he had recon skills. I'm pretty sure it wasn't available to everyone.
Recon is different. I'm talking about when they're in the mall scene where they're looking at a certain individual is looking across the sea of people and saying, "Why can't I just be one of these normal people again?" He's like, "Oh, you want to be normal? Check out this." And this the D-space layer that was pushed over to this individual was a level 1. So they were able to see everything. And he says, "Hey, yo, Bob, good luck with those blue pills. Be careful, because if you go drinking with that, you might have issues." And he's like, "Do you know these guys?" "No, I don't." "Well, where's your glasses?
Joe.
I want to get those glasses, man."
It does kind of amaze me when you see some of the advertising tech that exists, like having tested some of it. It is kind of nuts how much data is collected on purchases and how much is shared across companies. It's actually, if it was revealed to everyone, I'm guessing that's one of those people would be out in the streets on private. All of a sudden, everyone's caring about privacy issues now.
No one.
You don't think
gives a
so?
shit. No one gives a shit. Are you kidding? Like, no one cares. Like that. Like, we have known this. We have known this for decades. For decades, we have known that companies collect our credit card transactions to figure out what consumers are buying. Not only have they known, like, if you ask people what, why do you think your CVS receipts are so fucking long? I'm serious.
Legitimately, 100%.
That's exactly. You go and you buy something from CVS, and CVS spits out a receipt. That's an ad.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a receipt. That's not like a coupon to get. That's a fucking ad, right? And they know based on your credit card transactions all of that shit about you, and they're able to tie. Yeah, people know this. They just don't care.
It is amazing to me. How often have you had it where you've thought about buying something and then you see an ad about it? And again, it's situational. It's not like someone's reading my brainwaves. It's just like one of those things is how often does it happen where you're like, all right, that was a little scary. Like my father's like, I said something in the room and I'm pretty sure my phone listened to me and advertised it to me. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. But at the same time there's probably been indications. I'll argue this one with you, Gulo, for certain ones. I know how that technology works. I've tested a lot of it. Like, coming for you.
I do a lot of random things, and I'll be talking about something, and when I see an ad pop up for something that almost no one has heard of before, I'm like, I just was talking about this the other day. I haven't even started research. I haven't written anything down yet. What the hell?
Like,
so
I was looking for an
album
cover.
Were you talking about it with your friends?
Significant other, but these are
maybe they Googled it, and that is enough to trigger it. And I'm serious, that is enough to trigger it.
Well, that's true.
Like that's the thing. If you have a conversation with somebody and then later you get an ad, there's a decent chance they looked it up, and your location data next to them, Google all of a sudden knows where you were at.
No, good call.
And it's so stupid simple when you think through the situations that all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay. And then you go, am I okay with that? I don't have time to do this. I'm going to go get a bowl of rice. Whatever.
Well, there's not much that you can do about it. Even if you switch to, like you were talking about credit card data, even if I switch to cash, not everyone accepts cash anymore.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And trying to buy
that was illegal until
anyway, we're getting off.
Yeah, we're getting off topic. I'm going to pull us back. There was like the last one is the algorithmic governance. And I think we've touched on this. Like, I think long term that one would be an issue, but the Daemon kind of existed to be there for a while and then kind of faded off. It was also very weird to me the fact that the Daemon recognized it was the first of its species and there would be other ones. That is such a teaser where I'm like, maybe 15 years later he'll come out with the next book on Daemon. Like that would be like, what happened? Did another Daemon exist, or like some of the tertiary stories?
I will say there is a theme with his books and making sure that things are decentralized. And without trying to give anything away from any of the other books, is that decentralization is very important, because if there's a system that we are all trusting in that's all put in one point of power and that fails, decentralization will definitely help mitigate many of those issues that are going on.
So
this might do sense.
Overall, I'm hearing feasible, like not, again, suspend disbelief for a few things, because even like the auto hacking and whatnot, I actually would say we're significantly closer than we were previously. I can feed, I mean, even today, I can feed all that information into something like a chat GPT and have it start getting information, building out attack path. Like, give me Python code. I'm going to run it against production. It didn't work. Fix it. I'm going to run it against production. You could just completely just start smashing it. Distributed enough, easy enough, that's possible. I think there's a few suspended disbeliefs, but overall, like, a lot of this feels feasible.
Our last stream was literally on automated hacking. We watch you turn on your freaking flipper and crash your stream.
There is a difference though. DOS versus like takeover and control. And this is the part which I struggle with the Daemon, is that in some ways you would have to have a lot of foresight for a lot of the events that could occur. On the other side of things, we're reading the perfect attack and we're not seeing all the things that didn't work. And there was also the forethought of, I'm purposely going to put in some of these vulnerabilities, or these, I know feasibly I'll have these roadblocks, so I'm going to design around them. Mm-hmm. Let's go around the room. Where are we sitting? Feasibility. Could there be a master developer writing this right now, and we're waiting for them to die?
No, like there's too many things that have to go right. So like that's where it breaks apart. Like it becomes fanciful for me, is like there's just, for as big as complex a system it is, too many things have to go right for it to like. Let me put it to you this way: Elon Musk takes over fucking X and fires half of the staff, and the next day, like, the servers start to crash. Why? Because hardware has to be replaced on intervals, right? Like, all of a sudden, DRAM sticks start to just break down. Having a decentralized system makes that maintenance harder. Too many things have to go right in order for this all to work out. And eventually, the world governments just break out the tanks, right? So, like, that's not feasible. Like, each individual component of it, I'll say feasible. All collectively, I don't think feasible.
Gator?
Is it feasible? Yes. Are people actively working on it? And I think to that end, there are already people working on it. There are already corporations working on their own. And while when I read Daemon and Freedom, it changed my out view on things. I'm like, oh, we got to work on this. There's positives and there's negatives here. If you go slightly side topic of going to like Cyberpunk 2077 and you have like 3 or 4 corporations building the same thing on the back end, they're just going to be warring AIs to where this corporation is going to be feeding the information that they have into it. So is there a developer versus is there teams going through and working on this versus are there enterprises going through and working on this? And I think the answer to all of those questions are yes.
Gulo?
I think it's all feasible. I do agree with Gowrie. Having it all come together is a perfect storm. But if I'm able to start building some of this technology in my ghetto garage whenever I get bored at 2 a.m., then yeah, this tech exists. It's existed for a while, and it's who's developing it, who's building it, and who's going to harness it. It's a foregone conclusion that this tech is going to reach the markets, it's going to reach consumerism, it's going to reach someone at some point in time. Is anyone going to take all this tech and combine it together? And one of the things that Daniel's done, thank you, is given us a roadmap. I don't have the blueprints, but I know how it all comes together now.
I think on my side is I agree with Gowrie. I think he's a genius, fanciful man with beautiful hair who's also right about this with so much of it. I think there's parts of it which are very feasible. I think putting it all together is very becomes a little bit, you have to suspend disbelief. That being said, from 17 years ago till now, it is fanciful back there. Not even close. 17 years now, feasible. 17 years from now, I'm very curious. So on our stream in 17 years, this is what we're going to be talking about. I'll pencil it in the calendar. There's a lot to go through. Thank you so much. Gator, what do you got for us? What do we have to do?
So go read the book and go love your hacker family.
Thank you for watching on Saturday. We love you dearly. Thanks for watching and hack on.